Okay, you're going to say this. Hey, this is Tom Coyle, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hey, this is Tom Coyle, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, so just so the audience knows, I have been in some vacations and I had a pretty major family crisis that we're still dealing with. And so my time and my chaos level has been high. And Tom and I have sort of had this planned, and I have to on air publicly thank him for his flexibility in getting this done. I always want to record shows, Tom, but sometimes the other things conspire against me. But you worked with me, and boy, I really I can't say enough for people that are flexible enough to deal with these kind of things. But you're also an Army veteran, so you have some flexibility built into you because you've had to hurry up and wait. You've had to stand by
Oh,
so you can
yeah.
stand by on standing by. Another fun thing. But so look, so first off, first things, we have a lot of ways to cross paths, and this
Mhm.
technically isn't a spy versus spy show, but you are a diplomat of sorts. But I think let's forestall that conversation and let's just cover some of these other areas where we overlap. And I want you
Yeah.
to feel free to hit me back with a question too, because we do have a lot of similar views, similar works, and ways we can have a really good conversation. So let's make this less of an interview and more of a getting to know each other kind of session, and
Yeah.
being able to dive in. So let's just start. Give us the 30-second bio so folks can keep up. I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile here in the
Okay,
chat so
great.
everybody can look at it too.
Yeah, so a little about me. Graduated from West Point '97. I was always geared toward the service academy. In my younger days, I was always wanted to be a pilot. And then as my right eye started going bad, and to this day, my right eye is 2100, my left eye is 2020. So it's kind of cool. I don't need glasses. I got my right eye for nearsighted, my left eye for farsighted. So my brain just works it all out, but it couldn't be pilot. So then at that point, I started looking at, if I was looking at service academy, I had no interest in being in the Navy, being a boat for like 6 months out of the year. That sucks. And then the Air Force, if I can't be a pilot, what the hell do I want to do? That sounds kind of boring. Well, the Army, there's all kinds of cool things you can do if you're not a pilot. So that how I settled on West Point. And I was an artillery officer. So the cool thing about artillery is one of the things that you're responsible for the close air support component of that fire during fire support. So okay, I can at least tell the pilots where to shoot, right? That's kind of cool. And after being in the Army, I was the guy who always never went anywhere. It was funny. When I was an artillery officer, after being a fire support officer, I was a fire direction officer computing the guns. And then what happened was I got moved to an XO job, second command job, and that battery left to go to Kosovo. And then I took command of a Q-37 counterfire radar detachment. And I gave up command July 2001. And then after 9/11, by about December, that unit deployed to then provide force protection in Afghanistan. So then I showed up the third ID October 2002. And they're like, oh, yeah, we got everybody in place because we've been waiting for the balloon to go up for Iraq. So you have command experience. We need that to be the rear detachment commander. And so I never went anywhere. And then I became a diplomat. My first time was Afghanistan. So I had to be a civilian before I actually went somewhere. And it was kind of interesting. So being that perspective and having the perspective of both the military and the diplomatic thing, the State Department, and sort of understanding both worlds. And they had those provincial reconstruction team sites out there. And so I was very useful in that type of environment where being able to communicate, to speak military and speak State Department.
Right.
And then I started my own company, Invention Leadership, wrote a book, Leadership Lessons on the Battle of Gettysburg. And today I'm really kind of focused on leadership and how to helping leaders implement technology, autonomous systems, AI, because this thing's happening. And my wife and I are partnering on, healthy living and that type of thing. I was a cancer survivor. I got testicular cancer in 2019. Survived, 100% cured. And so we started looking at diet. And my wife, after the second pregnancy, she lost 45 pounds in 60 days just by changing her diet. So a lot of irons in the fire. And I excel at the time management piece, keeping that all and keeping everything straight. Plus I got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old I got to chase around.
My goodness. Yes, you are a busy guy and inspiring. So you had mentioned your book, Lessons for Leadership, lessons from the Battle of Gettysburg. And here is the Amazon link. Remember, when you guys buy books through Amazon, you are benefiting us and the author as well. They get a little piece, and of course, we get our little taste too. So whenever possible, buy the books through Amazon. And leadership lessons at Gettysburg. Holy cow, man, that's taken on a big topic. I mean, you have Longstreet, and did he do the right thing, and did he not do the right
Yeah.
thing, and on and on. And so many different leadership lessons in maybe the most famous battle in U.S. history.
Well, it's such an interesting battle. And the thing is, I find like foreigners know more about that battle than we do. And in fact, what's really interesting is I've given this where, like, we've had, one of my favorite stories, one of the guys I collaborate with on my Gettysburg staff rides that I do, he was telling me a time that he was basically dealing with some Germans who came through, and they said, this was your real American Revolution, the first American Revolution. Obviously we had to make a lot of practical decisions to get a union going. You had slave states, free states, and you're trying to, like, how do we try to appease enough people just to get a nation started, right? So you had to kind of have an imperfect beta version, if you will. And I know that for some people that could be a sound insensitive of calling it a beta version, but really that's what it was. We had to kind of come to an agreement to form a union, which means we had to make a compromises, and some we look back upon not so fondly. But then the Civil War sort of erased that. We get to that point right now where this was the thing that corrected the institution of slavery. So the Civil War ended that, and of that war, Gettysburg was the turning point. And so, so many lessons there you can pick from. And it's just such a fascinating topic. It's now come to life. My book sales have been going up a little bit. I guess people go down these rabbit holes on Civil War stuff. And I haven't promoted the book as much as I should recently. And then I start getting these checks from Amazon going, I guess people are buying it. And so I feel going down the rabbit holes.
Yeah. So when you look at it, I mean, as an officer, even though you didn't do anything, but as an officer, when you started to look at, what all the different things that happened, what for you were the lessons? Like, what's, I mean, obviously, getting to Little Round Top is instrumental in the battle.
Yeah.
And I guess, I'm part of that mission command group of people who are like, you understand what we're trying to do here. Go execute the plan. And so mission command kind of leads to this opportunity to take Little Round Top and change the nature of this battle forever. But what did you take from this battle? I've not read your book, so tell me.
So first off, the thing is, this is why I like having these discussions when I take people to the battlefield to sort of put this in there. There's no handbook that says if this, do that. Right. You got to look at things from the standpoint, and like, so Little Round Top. I mean, first off, one thing is you need people who are unafraid to use initiative. Little Round Top, that came from General Harrison, who was an engineer. He was a staff officer under Meade, and he's like, just kind of do some terrain analysis. He's like, and he sees the Confederate Army moving in this direction, and he starts grabbing people. Hey, you here? He did not have the formal authority to actually tell people what to do, and he's just doing it. It's the right thing to do. Hey, you here, you here, you here, and of course, Chamberlain, being one of the more famous officers, made famous from the Gettysburg movie. I think he was sort of overlooked until the movie came out. Now everyone's like, they talk about Chamberlain and that kind of thing, but he held Little Round Top. And that was not part of the plan. That was somebody in the right place at the right time and being empowered to make the right decision. And I love that aspect there. He didn't have an authority. He wasn't, in charge of anything. And then people understood the situation, thinking strategically, understanding, taking that mission command concept, the big picture here. And so people would say, well, who's Harrison? Oh, screw that guy. I don't know. He's like, okay, if this guy's seeing something, man, we better, let's do this. Then you touched on the Lee-Longstreet dilemma. This is, I think, one of my favorite stories there, because boss has a bad idea. That never happens, right? The boss never has a bad idea. And so Longstreet, man, 3 times goes back. Hey, bad idea. The first time saying, hey, remember the original plan wasn't to fight here. We're supposed to find some high ground, dig in somewhere, let them come to us. And let's just go around them. And, Lee just, didn't do it. And what I respect about Longstreet is once Lee made up his mind, he didn't badmouth the boss. He didn't, even after the war, he didn't say that guy was an idiot. He, in an organization like that, he did the honorable thing, which he did the best he could to plan that part of the battle, which became known as Pickett's Charge. And even he disagreed with it. He executed to the best of his ability. And to me, at least what I think, there's really 2 honorable decisions. You either hand him your sword and say, you know what, I resign. I'm done with this. I can't get on board this plan. Or you execute it the best you can. You don't just sit there and like pretend to execute, but you really don't. That's just kind of a dishonorable way of doing it. But then I like flipping it around. You're Lee. Your most trusted guy on the battlefield is telling you a bad idea. And how do you process that? Knowing that in the past, Lee had pulled off the impossible that people said couldn't be done. And you are ultimately the one responsible for it. To Lee's credit, he did take that responsibility. He said, that was my fault. I did. In fact, they were ready to go back at it again if Lee said the word. They were all returning back from Pickett's Charge. And so that was the thing. And then Longstreet's so fascinating. So I have to take this to a contemporary event here. We're talking about statues and that type of thing. Well, one thing Longstreet did is after the war, he continued to serve. He served as an ambassador. And then actually what was happening when Grant became president, Grant was saying, hey, listen, I need some help. These newly freed slaves can't vote. They're getting blocked. So Longstreet formed a militia to protect slaves, the former slaves who could vote. So we were thinking, hey, we want to tear down a statue. Like, well, I mean, yes, he fought for the Confederacy, but it just goes back to these are messy things and people make decisions. And yes, it'd be great if our heroes all did everything exactly right without a single flaw, but that world does not exist. In Longstreet, the discussion merits, did he redeem himself? And I think he does. Yes, he fought in the Civil War. Yes, he took up arms against the United States, but he actually formed a militia and he fought a lot of battles against the Ku Klux Klan, chasing them, keeping them away and all that kind of thing. And so and he got demonized the South forever. In fact, there was no monument to Longstreet at Gettysburg until after the Gettysburg movie, because Ted Turner's like, where's Longstreet's monument? He doesn't have one. And so they did the movie in 93. And so by 95, they put a monument up for him. He was so hated by the South for siding with Grant. And, he's the president. He asked me to serve and I served.
Complicated times. We just recently had a run of professors who dealt with policy and history, those kind of things. And even like the moment you dig into history, you find out you're like, God dang it, there's so much here. Like we were talking, Gerald Horne, who's very left leaning, says like basically he's a socialist, if not a communist, and he talks about the history of people. Kind of very Howard Zinni in a way. But when we talk about slavery, and he's the chair for Black history at University of Houston. This guy is no slouch. And he says, yeah, by the way, pick a country that was involved in slavery and understand their role within that dynamic to really understand what all of this means. I mean, if you're just going to pick a person and say bad, evil, you're going to miss out on so many different things. It's like a conversation with Native Americans and, whatever, the Shoshone or, whatever group it is. Heck, in my hometown, there's a bridge called the Carquinez Strait Bridge. And what's in Carquinez is not a Spanish word, it's Carquines, like it's an Indian word. And we don't even know that. We don't even keep track of it.
Right.
So we complained about Indian land, and here we are on someone else's land. We're not giving our house, and then who did the Carquines get it from? And then who did, and you just keep going back in history. And at some point, you have to be from somewhere, and that has to be your contextual time.
Well, in human history, if you want to understand human behavior, you got to understand an aspect of human nature. And nothing illustrates human nature more than watching kids. I love being a father right now. And we were just at the playground with some family friends, and they had a boy about the same age as my son. And they have all these buckets here. They have a sandbox. There are all these different buckets. And what are they doing? They're fighting over the same bucket. They could have grabbed any other bucket, but it's like, oh, he has that bucket. I want it for whatever reason. I want that specific bucket. I'm not going to just pick up and get another one. And you take it back to human history. The thing is, humankind has been very barbaric for most of our history. It was kill or be killed, conquer or be conquered. I'm not saying that's good, not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that was what happened. One of your guests you had on there, and I'm drawing a blank on his name. I was trying to look down on the phone real quick to see if I can remember who it was. He was critiquing the book White Fragility. He was on
Dr. Will Riley.
Yes. And we're talking about like the whole context of like, because now we're talking about Columbus. He's the latest bad guy. And they're talking about like well, how did the Aztecs become an empire? Yeah. I mean, the Spaniards simply had guns. That's why they won. I mean, The Aztecs were doing the same thing. They just used spears and bows and arrows and those types of things. And they conquered the empire around them. And that's what humanity was all about. Kill or be killed, conquer or be conquered. And again, if you take slavery and look beyond the American context, slavery continues to this day. But I mean, in that sort of an age of when our Civil War took place, I mean, Muslim countries, the Northern Africa and in the Middle Eastern area, they were kidnapping Irish and Norwegians and other Northern Europeans and forcing them to slavery as recently as the 1870s. And again, to have this context, and not just, and so it was not just a thing. I mean, the entire American continents, North and South America, the Isles. This was something that was going on. In fact, actually, it's really interesting. There was a Netflix show on Simon Bolivar, and now there's getting a lot of things because he came from a wealthy family who had a plantation, and on that plant, oh boy, now like Maduro is all upset about the documentary. He's like, "How dare you make him a slave owner?" Well, he was. I mean, and these are, it's good we're re-examining our history, but I think there's also a sort of a militaristic or a militant aspect of things where we're not even having discussion. There's no thought. It's we're destroying Grant's statue, for crying out loud. I mean, he's the guy who kicked the other as Bill Maher said last week. He's the guy who kicked all the other statues' asses when they were still alive to do something and fight back.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You got to look at, provide context. Yes, George Washington owned slaves, but he also is the first leader in history to willingly step down at his peak when he could have said, yeah, you know what, I'm going to keep going on this president thing. And we need to salute that. Part of the founding of the country, which, no, we did not live up to our ideals when we first started, but as we move each and every day closer to those ideals, it starts with 1776, the Declaration of Independence, and where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, just to take that one little branch you just talked about just now, the whole Washington thing. Yes, he owned slaves, and he was one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest person in, the North American continent. But without him, there wouldn't have been a nation.
Right.
Without his leadership, without his luck, without his, provincial destiny, however the impossible things happened, it was him and Franklin. We just had Ed Larson from Pepperdine, the historian. He wrote a book about those two guys. It's like, without them, if you didn't have their buy-in, this wasn't happening. People don't understand the history. And I'm not saying I'm a historian, but Washington showed up in uniform before there was even a military, and
right.
It was just known he's going to run this thing.
And one thing people don't appreciate it, not everybody in what is the 13 colonies was completely on board. In fact, when they were at Valley Forge, a lot of profiteers the Continental Army would buy supplies and they would rip them off. They'd give them, they had bags of ammunition. It was just nothing but sand because all the people, they took all the stuff, all the companies took all that out and gave them nothing to do with. So, a lot of the merchants were playing both sides of the spectrum there. So they did not have the universal support. And then not only that, the lessons from failure, because George Washington's most of his military career was a failure. In fact, there were some people, because of his success, as I say that sarcastically, in the French and Indian War, like, wait, George is in charge of the army? This guy? And, he just didn't, his persistence, he did not lose. And he kept that army together through the terrible winter of Valley Forge, which, anyone can lead when it's sunny and 70 degrees outside. But, that's when you're really there and folks don't have shoes and he's out there, sharing the suffering and doing that. That's just what he did. And there's some very powerful, positive leadership attributes that George Washington had in his ability to not quit and leverage something and sort of like, okay, how do we do this? And they end up winning. But it was just that, never quit, never let failure stop you. And you keep plugging along, failure after failure. He lost more battles than he won, but he won when it mattered.
And he drew it out, and you had a king that was going bonkers, literally, just there were so many different aspects of that, just the Washington part of that history. The fact that 13 colonies could stay together, because if he's not there, maybe some other general steps up and wins that thing. But they didn't have that thing that Washington had that united people. When they looked at him and said, we already know that's the guy. We already know he's going to be the president. All of these things, if he's not there, and it is some other guy who's 10% less than what George Washington was, you've got a whole different thing. And then you look at the history of Europe before that. When was there not a major conflict? 100-year war, 14-year war, this war, that war. It's all defined by war. But we had this one person who was monumental in the founding of this country, of this idea, and it's an incredible thing. So to look at him and say he owned slaves ignores all of history, all of it.
Right. And Bill Maher had a great quote from last week's episode. Is one of his new rules is like, instead of living in the past, how about we live in the present, make the future better? The idea that, and I think part of this is an arrogance of people saying, if I were there, I would have been this enlightened person. No, in fact, I was listening to Jordan Peterson, went down a rabbit hole with him, and I go down a rabbit hole. A lot of people. I listen to guys like Jordan Peterson. I listen to Bill Maher. So I'm getting a lot of inputs on people. Just I like to listen to what people are saying, and I don't necessarily have to agree, but I can listen to somebody and say, "Oh, that's interesting," and I can even find where do we have common ground on certain things. And he was talking about like the dangers of something like the Nazi regime is people think, "Oh, I'd never be like that," but yet there's a lot of Germans sitting there going, Sieg Heil. So obviously a lot of people did that. And, you get people at the right time, you'd find yourself. And if you were a white, non-Jewish person living in Germany, you probably would have been a Nazi. You would have.
We have a good example in modern times. The whole de-Baathification process. And you have all these people in the Baath Party like, hey, I didn't deal with their politics, but I didn't want to get shot. I didn't want to get noticed. I just I showed up and they told me to show up, but I was just trying to survive. And there were tons of guys that told me, whether they were lying or not, there were tons of people like that. So you're totally right.
Well, here's another thing about that story. I read this book, The Bomb in My Garden, and I can't remember the guy's name, but Bomb in My Garden. He was Iraq's chief nuclear scientist. Okay. And with the most asinine thing I saw is this UN inspector who was American, of course, and when the book came out, chastised him. How dare you? You lied to my face and said you had no nuclear program, and how dare you? It's like, dude, he lived under Saddam Hussein. I mean, what's going to happen? Like, yes, UN inspector, we have nuclear parts. I've hidden them and blah, 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 blah. My head is literally off if that happens. Right. So, and interesting enough, what he asserts in the book, because obviously the conventional wisdom now, and it's hard not to argue this point, is the Iraq war was a complete mistake. I've had that view for a long time. Even when I was in the Army, I was very careful who I told this to. I was worried, it's like, hey, we haven't finished off bin Laden yet. I think we're biting off more than we can chew here by going over here. But one of the things I thought, this is a mistake, but one of the things he makes a point in his book as Saddam's chief nuclear scientist is that when Saddam thought like he was no longer the center of attention, he had every intention of restarting his nuclear program. That was the assessment of Iraq's chief nuclear. That's why all those components were hidden in his garden. And so now you have to think about it and you say, okay, the weapons of mass destruction, he didn't have it, but at least I'm a little bit more sympathetic now to the decision the Bush administration made, going, ooh, because what would have happened if we don't attack, the sanction regime falls apart. The squirrel goes in some other direction. We're chasing the next squirrel in terms of the next thing you know, Saddam's like, look what I got.
Yeah. Well, and also Saddam wasn't a young man, and he was a strong man. So if the next person comes along and takes him out, or, I forget which son had his brains left in his head, but Uday or Qusay, whichever one it was, that was, the next person he was raised as a barbarian. I mean, he fed people to tigers and stuff. So I can see like the growing threat. Like here we are, and I've said this, whether or not the war was a good idea, if you have an unknown enemy like Al Qaeda, and you have this problem of Iraq in general in a region that you might be able to, if you can get Iraq to be Western again and stabilize and be strong against Saudi Arabia and against Iran, and they're a net food exporter when they're anywhere near healthy. Plus you have Kurdistan hedging your bet with you. And you get to pick to fight in the desert. Oh my God. I'd rather do that than Afghanistan any day of the week. Sure. Afghanistan's impossible to fight it. It's just impossible.
And at least Iraq, you've got people who were fairly educated. I mean, one thing that Saddam did and that kind of thing. We had Western businesses there. In fact, a little fun story is my neighbor across the street growing up as a kid, a guy named Ned White, and we've lost touch over the years. But I remember his parents moved to Baghdad. And his dad was going to run General Motors things out there. And then he came back, they had a family emergency. So he left. And had he not left, he would have been one of Saddam's guests in the 1990 Desert Shield, Desert Storm situation. We had those people there that became his guests, the hostage, if you will. So sort of beat out that. So in Afghanistan. And of course, Afghanistan you go into, because like my whole point is when Al Qaeda left Tora Bora and went into Pakistan, Afghanistan became irrelevant. It's like, okay, Afghanistan no longer matters. And no Afghan strapped a bomb and killed any Americans. Afghans are all inward people. The Afghans aren't, conquering other territory. They just want to be left alone. Half of them fight them just because we're there. But Pakistan, that's where the real guys went. And so that's where the real terrorists are. But our army's in Afghanistan. Then you start understanding why all these Afghans have these conspiracy theories. Because if America's there for terrorism, why aren't they where the terrorists are? They're here.
Right. Yeah.
And
Sorry,
no,
it gets me crazy. And we have gone very, very quickly from the Tudors to Washington to Iraq and
but I
Afghanistan.
think it goes back to the commonality here to tie it all together is this age of violence and humanity, and that kind of, but it goes back to these culture here.
Uh,
So when you look at Europe, when you look at the United States, we have this base, and it goes back to 1256 with the Magna Carta, this whole evolution to get us to where we are now.
right.
And then we go to Afghanistan, who are like 13th century. Most people, it's like, I mean, the leader of Afghanistan has always been like from Kabul, has always been called the mayor of Kabul because your reach never went by that. It's the same warlord's family who ran things back in the 13th century. And you're like, hey, we're gonna make you free. Like, what the hell are you talking about? There's no basis for this. And like one of the arrogance of how we went in there is we looked at, oh, look, Bosnia, Kosovo, those are Muslim countries, and we've been doing some successful peacekeeping there. Right. But they're also European with the shared European heritage. So it goes back to that Magna Carta and all those things that came up until present. That's part of their history too. And Afghanistan has none of this. And we expect people, we've gone from 1256 to 2020, and we expect them to do this in a couple of years. I mean, we went through a lot of blood. And in between, you had the Reformation, the 100 Years' War, the 30 Years' War, World War I, World War II, and I'm skipping a lot of wars. And then on the American continent itself, we went through all of this, and we go overseas and expect people to figure, hey, we're going to come in there, knock off a regime. Okay, guys, now you're going to do this in a few years. And it goes back to what you're talking about, the Iraqi, the cultural evolution you got to do, because it takes people time to change. One of the things about Saudi Arabia, they went from literally in one person's lifetime riding camels to having skyscrapers. And their mentality hasn't shifted. And there was a great book I read, and I wish I could remember the title of it, because I used to think, oh, the Saudis, like whatever. But the thing was very interesting point is they actually tried letting women drive in the 1990s. And then all the extreme guys threatened to, do car bombs and crap. They're like, okay, whoa. We can't do that. And to think of a domestic example, Barack Obama, he was against gay marriage when he ran in 2008. Did marriage between a man and a woman. So do we not build a statue of Obama? Because at one point he said gay marriage was bad, but he evolved because he knew, like, hey, to win the election against John McCain, I had to kind of win over some blue collar Democrats who are a little bit more conservative in their social views. So let me at least say something. And maybe he didn't believe it. I don't really know, but he eventually evolved and changed his mind. But the point is, are we allowed to evolve anymore? And we evolved all this enlightened thinking we have today. And a lot of the folks, like you take the current generation, they're blessed to have this thing where we've had a relatively easy life, being isolated and prosperous. But we took a lot of pain. And to sit there and say that you would not have been a slave owner had you grew up in that, or Afghanistan, they got the slaves today. They always pick on the Hazaras, or they pick on, and they have, of course, they have that that horrible practice of the young boys get passed around, if you will. But this is when something is just normal and everybody does it. It's hard to be the one who stands up and says, wait a minute, that's a bad idea. And the fact that we did that, we eventually ended slavery. I mean, it was, yes, we had it, but we also ended it in a very bloody conflict at that. But we did end it.
Okay. Yeah.
So well, we did a big giant circle kind of tying it all together, but I think it just kind of ties down to the foundation of where we are as a country and these ideas, and how I think we're judged on our ideals, rightfully so. And we were constantly moving to live by those ideals and realizing we didn't always do it perfect, but should we shame or silence somebody because they didn't always have the ideals? Do we allow the growth?
Yeah. I mean, and what we know from, well, the Sumerians, the Greeks, anybody who wrote anything down that we can still study, is that we're still trying to solve the same basic problems.
Yeah.
And it turns out you put a bunch of humans together, there's going to be a couple that are going to rise up top through domination and everything else. And the group as a whole are a bunch of assholes. Like we're just assholes to each other. So we need the good among us to go out and lead, and we're just not afforded that in this country right now. And it's part of the way we were built, I would say. Like if there were to be a new set of founding fathers that came along and learned from the American advancement in the evolution of governing a body of people, I bet they would improve upon the design. But for the most part, most countries pretty much follow. I mean, maybe it might be more parliamentarian, but they pretty much follow our Constitution and our basic set of laws. The pursuit of happiness element that we added in wasn't there before. to truly make these things happen. But again, it's on us as citizens. You know, like I had a conversation with a young fella, and he was talking. He's black, and he was saying that they don't celebrate the 4th of July because they weren't independent. And I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. The 4th of July represents the Declaration of National Independence. You
Hmm.
know, not your independence, not my independence. Everybody, like the nation of the U.S., declared itself broken free from King George and everything else. He's like, no, you don't get it. You know, my people were slaves. Like, yeah, I understand that. We're not talking about personal freedom though. We're talking about
Right.
national freedom. And then we had political freedom and we have personal freedom. These are all three separate things protected by three separate documents. But just the refusal to accept this historic fact. You know,
Hmm.
you can disagree with me. You're welcome to, but it won't make you right. It's just it's a
Exactly.
challenge.
And look, you're a free country. If you choose not to celebrate the 4th of July for that reason, fine. And I'll acknowledge that. No, you were not free, as you know, you were a slave. Your ancestors were slaves in that time period. That is actually factually true. I will not disagree with that. And that is a dark mark on our history. However, what I look at as the 4th of July is that celebration of our ideals of where we are striving to go each and every day. And, Abraham Lincoln deliberately used, when he gave the Gettysburg Address, deliberately used language from our Declaration of Independence, not our Constitution, a
Right.
flawed document that helped us just form a country, because we had to, again, to make this a tough decision. And let's go back to the tough decision here. Like we were saying, well, they should have not allowed the slave states.
Right.
Okay, but most of the Continental Army came from those states. And the thing is, you didn't know when Britain was coming back. Yeah, they signed a treaty, but like we had to develop strength to kind of do this type of thing.
And
And
by the way,
so,
we weren't holding up our end of the bargain at the end of the Declaration of Independence, and that's part of the reason why they came back. They wanted some of that money and everything else. You know.
yeah. And so, I mean, we had to sit there and and yeah, the leaders have to make tough decisions. And it's easy to look back and say, well, you shouldn't have made that decision. I mean,
Right.
yeah, I'm sure everyone would love to have a crystal ball and not make the bad decision that you made. But, what do you do? Should we not have the United States? I mean,
And
that's
just
the
to let me
decision.
jump in here,
Yeah,
most
yeah.
of the time, when the decisions are at the national level and it requires a bunch of very important and smart people to make a decision, you're not picking the best option. You're picking the least shitty option most of the time.
Right.
The one
Yeah.
that we all
Yeah.
hate the least, but we still hate it. You know.
Well, and the thing is, like, you got to get buy-in. And what's interesting about the Civil War, like, so it goes back to this whole thing when people, in time, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and I think a lot of people don't realize this. Here's a trivia question. How many signatories were on the Treaty of Paris to end the American Revolution?
I don't know. No idea. 0?
14.
14.
14 signatures. The Great Britain, and then each colony was signed on as a separate independent nation state.
Right.
And it's so, and bear me a second as I kind of tie this all in here. So now you take it to the Civil War, and the thing is, well, Robert Lee, he was a traitor. He fought against the United States. Well, until the Civil War, the concept of a national identity first wasn't really there. In fact, even look at the northern military units. You were with the 54th Maine. You went for the 12th Ohio. It was all about your state. And at the point, it was like your state was the center of your loyalty. That was still kind of how we thought ourselves, because it goes back to we had 13 signatures from our side as separate nation states negotiating the end of the war. And so there was still that mentality. We had not evolved to think of ourselves as a nation state yet, or one nation as if yet. It was independent states who did that.
And
then,
again,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
At the end of the War of Independence, there wasn't a constitution yet.
Right. Exactly.
We weren't really a nation yet. We'd said that leave us alone, but we hadn't said what us is at all. And that's that argument for the 4th of July. Like, no, we broke away from, like, we're just getting rid of the king here. And we all got rid of the king.
We are no longer underneath the king. That's right. It.
Yeah.
And then now you take the Civil War. The big controversy is, what's the Civil War about? And this goes back to how we talk to each other. It's one of my favorite topics of how we need to be able to understand people have different perspectives. Now, the thing is, you read the secessionist documents from the South. It was clearly about slavery. But then the Confederate leaders had the same age-old problem. How do you get young men to sign up and fight for your cause? That's a slightly different message. And so they start saying it's our way of life, Northern aggression. They're telling us what to do. And yeah, if you go down the rabbit hole, none of it, you really say, well, it's really about slavery. But the thing is, the average person picking up guns, you're not going to say, hey, we're fighting to keep my plantation and I'm fighting to keep my slaves, which of course economically make me a better alternative than you. And you can't really sustain yourself as a farmer because I got my slaves, but we're fighting this war for me to keep this thing. No, you got to give them different causes. It's not unlike September 1990, George H.W. Bush is on TV. This war is about jobs, jobs, jobs.
Yeah.
Suddenly, all the no blood for oil people came out. And obviously, whoa, no. It's like Saddam Hussein's like Hitler. It's about appeasement and all this other. He went back to more ideals because when he basically gave the honest answer, they're like, whoa, we don't want to fight for that. Oh, okay. Oh, well, we're fighting for this. Well, then, yes, of course, I'll sign up and fight. And that's the age-old problem. And then, of course, when someone signs up because they get told a reason to sign up, and it goes from generation to generation to generation, and they get this Confederate flag, and you go, hey, you're a racist asshole because you got the Confederate flag. It's like, well, hold on a second. No, that's not how I feel about things, because their programming is, my answer to not join for and all those types of things. And there's not listening. And so nobody's listening because like now the person with the Confederate flag feels attacked. The person who sees the Confederate flag sees attacked. And what persuaded it for me goes back to my high school time on this issue. I went to Grosse Pointe South High School in Michigan. It was primarily a white community in Grosse Pointe. And, what happened through a good portion of I think is like when Grosse Pointe North High School was created, there was like this tradition when we had our football games, we'd carry Confederate flags. Those are like for us a joke, North versus South type of thing. And we were Northerners, like the whole idea of slavery, it wasn't like in our consciousness, right? And then there was this whole thing it was getting really phased out by the time I got there, but there would be a few people carrying the flag. But people would ask, what's it mean? And everyone's like, oh, that's just kind of a joke. They're North, we're South. It's like a joke. It wasn't really a serious thing. And what finally put an end to it was an African-American student in our class wrote an editorial to the school newspaper, what the flag meant to me. He didn't say you're all a bunch of racist assholes. He's explained this. And we're like, oh man, I feel like an asshole. I can't believe we even considered doing this. And then pretty much, poof, all the Confederate flags went away. You never saw another Confederate flag. School policy didn't do it because the principal say no Confederate flags, but you always have someone carrying a flag and waving it. There'd be a little thing in there. What stopped it was him just, this is how I feel. I'm like, oh man, yeah, I can't do that anymore. Yeah. And we're not having discussions that way. It's about attacking somebody instead of listening, or at least saying, I hear what you're saying. Let me tell you how I'm hearing that, and saying, oh, wow, yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and as a guy that just drove through the South on a trip, maintaining awareness for veteran suicide and trying to prevent them, I didn't see but a handful of any Union or Confederate flags at all. It just was barely there at all, and I didn't meet a bunch of racist people. I didn't meet a bunch of people that were stupid and poor and didn't have teeth. These tropes are wrong in every direction. I'm not absolving them from people that do terrible things, but those people exist everywhere. And if we're going to have a national conversation about who we are, we ought to get to know one another. We ought to go out and see how great this country is and how diverse it is. And diversity is not color of skin alone. It's look, and Scott Husing and I say this all the time. It's about it's veterans, it's disabled people. In what other country is there an ADA that protects the rights of handicapped people and values their contribution? I mean, that's not a common thing. And to have it protected by an entire movement, this is a special place. And if we don't allow it to be, then it can't be,
Well, here's how special this place is. And I've used this argument before. It's easy to look at because the news has the it bleeds, it leads type of thing. And you look at a lot of things, and I'm really big on data. And here's the thing I'll tell you, and I was actually overseas when Obama got elected. There is no country in the world today where the equivalent of Barack Obama gets elected once, much less twice, in a free and fair election. You couldn't even get a white Algerian to win in France. I mean, you can't. I mean, take the most supposedly enlightened European country, and you tell me Barack Obama can get elected, that equivalent? Absolutely not. No, it won't happen. And in fact, the same year Barack Obama was reelected, Detroit elected its first white mayor in 1960 since 1968 or whatever. I mean, to me, this is a positive story where we're looking at people going, And Michael Moore pointed out in his documentary Trumpland that about 80% of the people voting for Trump in Michigan voted for Obama twice. So we start talking about the whole And then in 2025, the majority of kids under the age of 18 are going to be of mixed race.
Yeah.
Suddenly, we don't look like this racist nation. We're marrying each other. The opportunities never been better. And I think there is a gap, and it comes down to income. And, we look at all that happened. I mean, the white poor family in like West Virginia closed down coal mining town has the same problems as Chicago inner city: violence, drugs, all that stuff, more instances of police brutality. And again, the police thing, we start looking at the police thing. Well, okay, we got troops in Germany and South Korea. When's the last time we shot an innocent person there? It never happens because we're in a peaceful country. But Iraq or Afghanistan, of course, we're going to have accidental deaths, because when you're in a violent place, you're a little bit quicker to grab that gun or do something. And where do these killings take place? Police killings, and they are wrong. And I support the protesters for what they're trying. And they've drawn attention to issues like qualified immunity and things that need to be addressed. But I mean, these aren't happening in nice suburban town that are that kind of thing. So you get above a certain income class, and those issues with the police aren't happening. And so, let's address the economics. It's easy to tear down a statue. It's easy to say, let's not have that flag anymore. Okay. What about the hard decisions? How do we go into places like Chicago and bring up the education level, which then gets into more opportunities and more of it? Those are the hard conversations. It's but I can put a hashtag and say, racist loser, hate them. Okay. What are you actually doing? And you look at flags. You want to stand for the national anthem? Great. But standing for the national anthem, you're not helping a veteran. You want to kneel for the national anthem? Great. How are you helping your cause? Because if that's all you're doing, that is really the least you're doing. Yeah. What's your tangible thing?
And the same thing goes for voting. Don't be sold a bill of goods. Voting is the end of the line. The decisions have already been made. You're just picking yes or no to a decision that is not that great. Hey, I love it.
Hey, wait, buddy. Wave. You're on the show, Tom. You're on the air.
You don't care about that. Hey, buddy.
He's curious. So I had a biopsy. There's a little mole-ish thing on the top of my head. They were doing a biopsy, my annual skin doctor check type of thing. And so he's wondering why there's a Band-Aid on my head, which the viewers can't see. It's like if I turn my head, there it is.
I wanted to go back to your thing, like what are you doing? What are you accomplishing? While you get your check from your biopsy check.
Well, it's Tommy, let's put it later. We're on TV right now, buddy. We're on there.
But that, like if you're going to fire Mrs. Butterworth or Aunt Jemima or whatever it is, great. But yeah, didn't we already do this? Didn't we already change Aunt Jemima before? Like, what do we need to do? And you're right. These things often come down to if we can raise because you made the great point. It's not poor people getting shot by cops. It's just not. That's just. I'm sorry, it's not rich people.
Right.
It's folks who don't have enough money quite often, and so when you look at that, same thing with we have Bjorn Lomborg on the show, and he's like, if people had more money, didn't have to live this horrible life, when the globe warms up, it's going to be horrible for them. So let's continue to, and we're doing a great job, by the way, as a globe at reducing, that grinding poverty. I'm not saying that everybody's well off, but if we focus there and got more people to be more self-sufficient financially, which includes education and a strong house, now you're really making a difference with the big numbers. You can never solve all of the problems for all of the people. Right. But if you're just going to focus on what the bottle of syrup looks like, please, you're not taking this seriously.
Well, here's something I did. So I actually owned some property in Indianapolis, and I had some Section 8 tenants in there. And, I went to check on the investment, and it was interesting this was 2011. I was there checking in there. Now keep in mind, so I just hate buying stuff type of thing. Like if I got something that's functional and it works, then I'm not going to get another one just because it's a little bit better. And so I still had the old non-flat TV type of thing. That was my base TV in my condo in there. And I go into this house, it's a duplex. And this one on Government Simpson had 3 flat screen TVs.
Yeah.
And the kid had a mattress, no bed that was sleeping on. And now when we look at this and we're like, well, what an idiot. But what's really interesting is that they think of success as having things. And I started, hey, well, I didn't sit there and say, well, and the easy thing was, again, the previous owner was like, oh, what a bunch of deadbeats. They have these TVs and that kind of thing. So I was like, why'd you get a TV? Well, it's successful. I want to have TVs and it shows that we're making it. It's sort of like a symbol of my dream. Okay, well, actually, how about this? How about you maybe get rid of, sell a couple TVs and then have one and then work towards something. And we actually have started developing a financial plan for them and sort of coaching them about money, because they don't really know how. They think that if I buy things, I'm successful. So that leads to like, let me soup up my car and do that type of thing. I had a soldier whose family's living in a trailer park, and he like comes back. He's like, he came back with all this war money. Look at he kind of souped up his car like Fast and Furious type of thing. He put like $80,000 into his car. I'm like, your family lives in a freaking trailer. Oh, my wife thinks it's cool. Okay, you got some unique woman there. So I don't know too many women would say, honey, you did a good move souping up your car like that, because I like living in this trailer. And it's just that poor people don't know how to use decisions about money. They're not bad people. They're like, a lot of people like think she's just, whatever. She just doesn't know what to do with money. And you had to kind of, and me kind of coaching her on this, and then, start doing some things. And hey, you could take classes here, and you instead of buying things, invest in yourself.
Yeah,
and they actually moved on. She ends up getting, and she was the last good tenant I had in that property, because then she ended up moving up, getting a job, moved in better quality housing and this and that, and moving herself up over time. And that's the thing, is where do we put our resources in there? I think it was I think it was the guy, and I forgot his name again, the white fragility guy. And I think it was that episode where he was talking about Oprah. When he was talking about Oprah. Mm-hmm. About the whole thing. It's like, okay, well, what's Oprah doing in those communities to help people out? I know she's gone overseas to adopt kids. What about adopting kids that are right here in America that need some help? Wow. And like, I'm doing a part, my Adventure in Leadership. I've been in, working with the underprivileged community here in the DC area, doing leadership programs and stuff like that for kids. So like, I may not go to the protest, but I don't go to protests or rallies. I'm just not a protest or a rally guy, because I think they're stupid. But in terms of where the rubber meets the road, giving some kids some leadership skills, and I've been doing some free tech classes. I've been doing during the COVID thing, just taking some knowledge and bringing on some data science and teaching some coding and stuff for kids. I mean, I'm actually helping people learn some skills, because that's what it's going to take. Just sitting there saying, okay, I did the easy thing. I went to a protest, I went to that. Okay, what's next? What's the actual change that happens?
Yeah. Run for office.
I'm too reasonable. I don't shout down at people. I don't take an extreme viewpoint. It's like, I post something on Facebook. It's well thought out and reasonable. I get a few likes, but then the person who posts out like a bunch of nonsense that's way one wing or the other, they get all kinds of attention.
I just can't even do it anymore on Facebook. I'm not leaving it necessarily, but it's just there's so much hate there. I was going to point out an interesting. Flo Groberg is our Algerian of descent guy who won the Medal of Honor, or earned the Medal of Honor. I mean, and here's a kid who grew up in Paris, or was born in Paris, comes to the United States with this Algerian, descent mom, meets a dude, and he's an officer in the army, he's like, you're not even from here, and you never knew your real dad. And here's a guy that goes out, and not that winning the Medal of Honor makes it for you, but for the most part, those guys can always make a living. There's always speaking engagements or whatever it is, they can get something. And we have representatives in Congress who are refugees, who are in refugee camps, and they're Islamic and they're black, and we don't care. We're like, I don't agree with your politics or whatever it is, right? But that's possible here, and that's not possible in a lot of other places.
And I want this one thing, and in fact, I'll share a story. One of my close with my classmates, we're actually in a company together right now that we're just started up. But we're in a discussion, and we met up. This was February of this year, and I was sharing a story how we're too quick to react. So my wife and I, we were driving up. We were coming back from a birthday party, and and we passed a Home Depot. We've had a bunch of crap in the car. We had to return to Home Depot. We just never get around to it. Oh, what? Home Depot right here. Let's just stop. And so we go and pull in Home Depot. My wife runs in. I'm driving. So I just pull the curve. She runs in there. Return it, comes back with the same item. She's like, yeah, they said we can't return it here. We have to go to the same Home Depot. I'm like, this is effing ridiculous. I grab the shit. I go in there. No problem. Now, at first I'm thinking, wait a minute. My wife's Latina. Like, okay, is there some kind of a racial thing going on here? So I go in there. Excuse me, my wife was just in here. Oh my God, sir, was she the lady in the red? Yes, I am so sorry. I'm new here. And his employee, because some people go to the Home Depot, they're like their employee, 30 days on the job or something like that. He's like, I didn't know I could do that. I thought you had to go there. And then my manager, as soon as you sent her away, my manager, why'd you send her away? Like I explained, he goes, you idiot. And so I tried going out there, and then talked to the manager. Manager's like, he gives the exact same story. So the amount of time, they could not have cooked this up if they were making it up. Right. It's like, it's like now. someone different could have been on social media, Home Depot racist, hashtag racist Home Depot. Like, take a minute to clarify. Now, if he had said like something else, I could tell he might have even confirmed he was racist. But look, let me at least take that step to confirm what I think might be going on. Well, it wasn't. New employee.
Absolutely. Let the person tell you no. Let the person fail you. Give them every opportunity to do it, because they're going to try it. For the most part, most people are going to try to not fail.
And he, to his credit, hearing my story, he said, man, I have to rethink an incident. Because he was talking about an incident. Well, he shared the same kind of incident. What happened was he was in the airport executive lounge. He was traveling, and he's walking through, and a white woman moves her bag closer to her. And at first he's like, oh, man, how do you're not going to do me like that, right? And then he realized, oh, wait, no, she was just moving the bag out of my way because it was in the path. Right. And so many times you have to look at your frame of reference. And so some of that is, if you believe there's always an obstacle, you're going to always see it from that obstacle. And it's interesting, because I think there's another, like, one kind of racism that I've seen is race within your race. What I mean by racism within your race. So what I was, like I said, I've been playing drums since I was 8 years old, and I heard this reggae band was looking for a drummer to serve on a cruise ship for a weekend. It's like, I'm going to audition. It's like, Tom, you can't do that. Why not? Because you're white. I can play reggae, but you're white. But it was other white people. No African-American musician, no Caribbean, none of them ever said, Tom, you can't do it. I won the audition. I got to play on a cruise ship doing reggae music, I think.
I have to start the song with the fill, right? Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, exactly. But like, no, I had fun doing it, and I got the job. And then I was in Nashville. We were doing a recording. We were trying to get, we were trying to do a demo, and this A&R guy from a prominent record company who's African-American shows up, and he goes, who's this? It's our guitar player. Whoa. Black guitar player? That doesn't work. That's not rock and roll. Go play some hip hop or something.
Yeah.
I mean, again, not a white guy, black guy. So this is the kind of thing we limit ourselves. And sometimes within communities, we limit beliefs by saying, you're this, you can't do that. I mean, the reason I think you have white basketball players from Europe is because no one says you're white and can't play basketball. And likewise, you have Nigerians who Nigerian Americans are now the #1 demographic in this country economically.
That's right.
And, I mean, do you think the average racist can say, you know what? I can differentiate between that Nigerian and this other African-American who traces the roots of slavery? They don't know.
Nope.
And so when you have a different mindset, again, not to say there's not racism, not to say people haven't had it harder than others. Absolutely, this is true. And I salute Black Lives Matter for bringing some of these discussions to the forefront, which need to have been had, and to understand that. And especially with police accountability, I don't necessarily think there's a police problem per se, but there is too much of an accountability problem. Like I'd say, 1,004 people were killed in 2019 by police. From a statistical standpoint, that's not a big deal. That's all in number. That includes people who were in shootouts and people who were just, unarmed. But there's been a lot of prominent things in the news of African-American men being murdered by cops who were unarmed. And it's like, okay, there's an issue here. And the issue is when they are going to trial, there's no accountability, right? So I understand that. And we need to have those discussions and talk about those things. And so, yes, let's have those discussions. But I think when you look at it as there's a society that keeps me down or keeps somebody down, the data just doesn't show it. I mean, there's an economic issue, and people who are disadvantaged economically are going to have a lot more pain to go through. And how we help those folks, that's something we as a nation need to figure out what the path is to do that.
Yeah, no, you're right about, I mean, there's so many things in that. Obviously, there are problems with race, but if you start with race as the default, here's what I've discovered is it rots out the logic in a conversation. Right. Even if the problem is a race-based problem in that one specific case, it's so emotional, it's so caustic that when it's not the problem, it's impossible to see what the problem is. And as a leader, as someone who's trying to figure these things out, like, okay, well, let's put race aside for a second. What else could this be? And you can't, because race just runs in the room and fills it up, and it's like, oh, you know what? I don't know what we can do about that.
Well, and the thing is about having an open, honest discussion. Like one of the lessons I learned by accident is just not to dismiss people. So when I was rear detachment commander, one of the things I had the joy of doing is court-martialing or chaptering people who were like basically AWOL or the other kind of thing. And so we had a bunch of people who were AWOL and they were coming in there. And so what had happened was I had 2 white soldiers, and what I did with them is I put all the charges in the Article 15. And because and what I didn't realize I was doing is it prevented me from charging me for the other stuff that could have given them prison time. I wanted to give them the Article 15 just to confine them and then put up some other charges. Like, you can't go that'd be double jeopardy. I'm like, oh crap. So I couldn't go to jail. Then I had a thing with 2 African-American soldiers. What happened with them is they had, they were getting jail time. There was a plea deal. And then one of my NCOs, African-Americans, say, hey, sir, there's a perception, there's a race issue. 2 white guys did something, no jail time. 2 black guys getting jail time. And my initial instinct, that's ridiculous. This is not they thought, have a formation. I'm going to talk to everybody. Okay, guys. I understand there's been an issue. Let me talk to you what happened here. So these 2 dudes, white dudes, this is what I did. So I screwed up. Now, does anyone not think that they're going to do something stupid where I won't be able to throw them in jail? I mean, they're going to probably do that. But here's the thing. Even though I didn't give them jail time, they're getting dishonorable discharges. However, these guys, they're getting a plea deal. They're going to spend 30 days in prison while we process all their paperwork, and we're giving them an honorable discharge. Now, which one would you rather have?
Right.
Like, yeah, I'll take choice B, 30 days in jail and an honorable discharge. Yeah. So when I explained it to them, and that's, I think the thing is what we can, is there's too many people, like the extreme side is the people who see racism everywhere. Then there's the people who say racism doesn't exist and they're dismissive of it. And you can't be either. And had I been dismissive, I would have taken something that wasn't racism and I would have had a race issue. But I didn't dismiss the concern or the complaint, took the time to explain to people. And so many people came up to me and said, sir, thank you so much for clarifying that. Because, and me being, and if it had not been for that NCO telling me, hey, sir, we got a problem here, yeah, I'd have been like oblivious to the situation.
Yeah. And to be a good leader, another thing, along those lines is you have to allow yourself to make mistakes and admit them, and how many commanders have a formation to say, hey, procedurally, I screwed this up. I'm new at, I've never put people out of the Army before. I'm not an expert in this. And so if you gave me a different opportunity, I might have approached this differently. But here's what we did do, with taking that into account. And I've learned from it. I expect you guys to make mistakes and learn too. I told my daughter growing up when she was small, like, your job's just to, make mistakes, learn from them, have fun. Yep. And if you can repeat that process, you're going to be fine. Whatever comes up, you're going to be fine.
That's it. And, you're not going to be the best version of yourself all the time. I mean, look, Governor Northam in Virginia, there's a photo of him from high school where he had blackface on. But objectively speaking, he has been a leader in terms of, enabling opportunities for African Americans. So it's like, okay, so are we going to say he should resign because at a party when he was like, he's now in his 50s, because when he was like 17 or 18, he did something and now we're going to hold him to that? I mean, then what's the incentive to improve? I mean, can we accept the fact that we can be better tomorrow than we are today? And if we can do that, there you go.
I mean, I think it's fair, and again, we're always going to have these social problems, but culturally, if we can't accept that, like one of our greatest advantages as a nation is that we have such diversity, but diversity is the opposite of unity. And so when you look at a place that has a lot more unity, like say like New Zealand, they can move quickly on a certain thing. Austria can move quickly on a thing because, they're pretty much all Austrians there. We have people all over the world that are desperate to come here. And then we have to figure out how to manage all these different socioeconomic, areas, these giant regions, totally different, economies. Yeah. And then, oh, by the way, diversity, cultural difference, all these things, it takes a lot to get us to unify and go in a direction. But we managed to do it. And our country is built to be just a rolling gunfight with itself anyhow. That's why we careen from right to left, and we drive ourselves crazy doing it. We're about to have an election, and I'm positive that something crazy will happen between now and then. Whatever you think is going to happen today will not be the case in 100 days. And then also pretty much whoever loses is going to say the election was invalid. That's part of our richness. That's a byproduct of that. But if you are a person from another country who's got some kind of severe handicap, who believes in a different kind of God or no God at all, you can come here. It doesn't matter what you call the thing between your legs. It doesn't matter who you bump your thing between your legs against the other person, as long as you're both adults. Can you do your job? Are you trying to get better every day? Well, then come on. We got time. We got help for you.
And yes, we haven't always been that place for people. That wasn't the thing. And, we get better. And that's the thing about that. I mean, like, my own little story, I had a little Facebook thing about this. It was last summer. I was, my wife and I were doing this flamenco show. I was percussion. She was a dancer. And then of course she has this very elaborate dress Adolfo just came in there with about race, a great in the past times player, but we also can't forget about gender disparity. Yeah. Oh yeah. You're talking about that. I was reading very best about that. Wisconsin facing the killing of the evil pimp. Yeah, that's a thank you for sharing that. You're absolutely right. And there's so many areas of when we talk about gender, race that we can get into. And yeah, we have to sort of think about the spirit of the law rather than technicality. I mean, okay, you killed an evil pimp. That's probably deserving of a medal, not prison. That's the world.
And again, maybe. I mean, you got to stand in front of your jury of your peers, and when you say killing an evil pimp, and I don't mind Adolfo participating, and I'm not saying he's wrong, but there's a lot of hyperbole in that, right? So sit in that jury box and look at that, and if I know what that case is, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to hear what happened. A person who's abused, turns around and does something that's murderous. It's not a wash. It doesn't balance.
Well, and Pete, I'm glad you said that, because I think you got to take it back, because I think you catch me. You see something in motion, and here we are talking. This is a great discussion. You emotion. I mean, yeah, I read that. Yeah, how dare this is an outrage. But sometimes we don't always have all the facts, and it's sometimes like I use the Jussie Smollett case. I mean, there was, oh my God, here's the race. Oh, wait a minute, that's not what happened. And even in the George Floyd incident. I mean, now at the end of the day, the cops crossed a line, but watching the entire body cam footage, which was leaked out there, to me, up until the point that he maintained the knee on the person's on George Floyd's neck, the cops were very professional. I thought, okay, this wasn't like some let's go get this guy. Everything was professional. And they were professional until they weren't. And once you had positive control over him, okay, get the knee off the neck and proceed with what you got to do. At that point, no, yeah, yes, was he clearly was drugged out. Right. He did not deserve to die. And yet I'm seeing people going, oh, he was drugged out. He deserved to die. Or he didn't listen to the cops' instructions. Okay, yes, he participated in the escalation, how cops had to react a certain way. But at the end of the day, the cops need to be held accountable because he did not deserve to die. And yes, there's a little bit more to the story, watching the whole body cam footage and what we saw. But at the end of the day, you still kept a knee on the guy's neck for 9 minutes. Unacceptable. And so, but yeah, the key is, sometimes you get there, and Mark Twain said, the lie can get out around the world before the truth even gets out the gate. In today's internet, it's even there more. But yeah, we should be discussing this, and we should be discussing the justice system in general. Again, lower income people get the shaft more so than upper income people. I mean,
yeah. I mean, you want to give me one issue. Let's work on trying to get folks to be a little bit more balanced with their income. And I'm not saying give them anything. Just remove barriers from folks. Like politically, we have a lot of people that focus on, like, if you bootstrap yourself and take help wherever it is and everything, you can do it, and that's fine, and that works. And then you have a lot of folks that are like, hey, all we got to do is work together as a community and help these people who need help. And hey, you know what? That works. The problem is that none of them work reliably and repeatedly,
right.
And so you're always trying to balance the, how do we make strong, resilient people? And then how do we make people strong and resilient? Like, it's two different ends of the thing, and neither of them have the answer. When we drive ourselves crazy trying to figure out,
Well, and it's about doing what you can in your small space. Tom Connors, that's where I draw the line. I'm not jury minded. We're all judges. Jury is different. Well, that's a good perspective.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, it's Friday, and I've had you burn out, and we're not going to figure it out. And we didn't get to AI. We didn't get to the fact that you've been a diplomat. We didn't get to your cookbook. We didn't get to your battles of cancer. The fact that you're in a band still to this day. So we have more things to talk about. And man, I appreciate you coming on. I dig it. And I really want to talk more about your Gettysburg tours too, because the more we can apply history into real sense and go and experience it, I just think, the better off we all are. The one thing that I've learned from all the things that I've learned, and this is a common thing that people learn, and look, all the books behind your head back there. It's like, the more I learn, the less I know. The more I'm sure that I make mistakes that I can't even see or realize.
Here's some I'll throw out here right now. We get your listeners, we'll figure out a program for who wants to participate in an event. We actually go to Gettysburg. I mean, obviously we got to deal with the COVID thing, but about these battlefields, we can maintain social distancing. My sort of shtick when I take companies on this thing is I've partnered with a whiskey distillery there on site. So we go to the battlefield and then have some whiskey afterward and learn some leadership, learn some history, and then discuss some things. And maybe that's something we can kind of do as part of the listeners of the Break It Down show, offer some kind of special deal for the folks, your audience, and do something like that.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, listen, again, it's Friday. Thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for the chat. I think these chats are helpful because there's a lot more folks that want to try to, figure these things out than there are folks who are yelling and screaming at everybody. And that's why I like it when Adolfo or Tom or anybody else comments, I do my best to try to bring it up because it gives us all a chance to look at that. So Tom Coyle Jr., there's his LinkedIn profile. I'm going to put up your book for Gettysburg because there are a lot of folks who like that kind of thing. And again, as always, buy your books on Amazon through the link. If you're going to buy something on Amazon, let me know. I'll send you a link. That helps us out. And I appreciate everybody for coming on and just participating. These conversations are way more valuable than the nonsense you see in the news because that's such crap. So thanks again, Tom.
Thanks for having me, Pete. It's fantastic. Have a great Friday and look forward to chatting again soon.
Stand by.